Hello, folks. Happy New Year's Eve. Happy Monday. We were not supposed to do a show today, but there was so much news going on this weekend, trade-wise. It was just we had to do something, even if it's a little shorter than normal. Want to start with some pre-show stuff because I wasn't that focused on the NFL yesterday because the Bills are out. Actually, because much better, but I think they're going to end up with like the 9th or 10th pick in the draft, and the Jets. What, Jan? They're going to end up third, I think.
Third. Yep, third.
Yeah,
with Arizona and the 49ers losing, they end up third.
But I have to say, like, it's Black Monday, as Jan called it, and that's what happens. But it got a jump start yesterday because and at least one coach got fired right after the game. But it's really funny. It's like, I mean, you don't see this in any other sport, but in the NFL, it's like right after, boom, let's go. And what is it now? Was it 4 or 5 coaches today have gotten fired?
So far today, well, Bowles, I think, was after midnight Eastern time, so he counts as today. Steve Wilkes has mostly told his team in Arizona he's been fired. Vance Joseph just got fired as well. That's 3 right there. Who else got fired yesterday, Mike? Remind me.
Well, I know that there was a lot of talk about the Green Bay situation. Obviously,
well, the interim kind of gone already. So
right.
Obviously a new GM in Oakland with Mayock, who's the NFL draft analyst, who's now the general manager.
Which is basically like hiring Craig. Well, no, Craig Button was a GM, but it's like hiring. There's so many, like hiring Mel Kiper as a general manager. It's that's a little.
At least Mayock played the game at a high level in college and was almost drafted, right? Yeah. So he kind of knows the X's and O's of the game itself. And there's been rumors for a while that he was a potential GM candidate. I mean, you look at baseball where agents are becoming GMs. Yes. And it's not a direct linear path anymore from going from a guy working in the back office to moving up to assistant GM and then becoming GM. So I can't say that I'm surprised. The one comment I thought was very interesting, and I can't remember whom, somebody said that Gruden needs somebody who's willing to challenge him, and Mayock is a guy who's willing to challenge him. Now, you can take that with a grain of salt and whatever you want. And look, I don't love what Gruden's done. I can mildly understand it because honestly, I think his view was they weren't good enough to win. He's tearing that team down, getting a ton of draft picks, and intends to build. But if he's tending to build his team as he did 10, 12 years ago, he's going to have a very hard time winning in the NFL.
Yeah. The other thing is he's building in Vegas, too.
There you go.
There's the whole thing. The taxes are different, the excitement, the hype, the lifestyle. Everything's, like, as a guy who's been to Oakland, California a number of times, that's a difficult sell.
They don't give a crap about the last 2 years. Oakland could have spent their money and tried to plug holes and competed for a playoff spot. They decided, we're going to rip this apart. We're going to tear it down. We're going to be good when we get to Vegas. That's all they care about. So anyway,
we're giving the fans there some excitement, and off we go.
Right. All right. Well, let's start the show. Peter, you follow my intro.
Yeah.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, December 31st, 2018.
I am Peter Tessier in minus 42 Winnipeg, Celsius or Fahrenheit. You choose.
And I am Jan Levine in 42 degrees Fahrenheit, New York right now. So I have the inverse of Peter. So I'm very happy. So Peter, I'm sorry you're a popsicle stick over there, but hey, better you than me.
It's minus 42 Kelvin. And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Russ Cohen is wending his way towards Notre Dame for the Winter Classic tomorrow between the Bruins and Blackhawks. Eck is on his way back from sunny Florida. I am stuck in Buffalo.
You can just say that all the time, Mike.
Yes, that's true. But there was some news this weekend, and like I said, we had to do a show because there were some trades and some significant trades and some trades that we can make fun of because I think some of them are pretty hilarious. But let's start with 3 teams. Let's start with the Florida Panthers, because if you look at the 2 deals that they made, and we'll talk about the Hutchinson deal first, these deals are indicative of Dale Talon getting the jump start on the rental market because, Peter, Hutchinson is a good third goaltender. Yeah. He was signed or was brought to Florida as insurance against Roberto Luongo's injury, which has already happened. He played a few games when Luongo was hurt. He's making $1.3 million. He's a UFA at the end of the year. So he was in the American Hockey League. So for the Leafs, who right now have a little bit of a uncertainty going on with the status of Frederik Andersen, and we still don't know how. They say day to day, but day to day could be a couple weeks. You don't know. They don't have anybody with any. They didn't have anybody with NHL experience behind Garrett Sparks, and Sparks doesn't have that much experience as well. So they gave up a 2020 5th-round pick, which I thought was, a reasonable price and a prudent move for Dubas for Hutchinson, and he's going to play with the Marlies. But I would think that probably when they play another game on Thursday against Minnesota, if Anderson is not back, Hutchinson will be the number 2 behind Sparks and probably will get some action pretty soon. What did you think of that deal?
Yeah, I mean, it's the short term. It's the best of probably not the most ideal short term solutions for him. Michael Hutchinson's a funny goalie. He's got I don't know how. I mean, he's okay. So goaltenders are voodoo, but with Hutchinson, he is a guy who last year, when challenged and put down in the AHL, he actually launched into probably his best statistical career that he's ever had in pro hockey. He barely had just over like a 1.0 GAA, and he was rocking like a 930 save percentage for most of the year. Yeah. Steve Mason with the Jets was called up a number of times, or Steven was injured with the Jets a number of times, and Hutchinson was called up to fill in, and he did admirably when called upon.
Right.
There was tension. He didn't want to be down there. He quietly asked for a trade a couple times, and the relationship wasn't great, but he got his chance. He got a bit of a pay raise in the offseason. Florida probably for the same reason that Dubas has acquired him, grabbed him as another goalie, not knowing what was going on with Luongo and injuries, not having faith in Reimer.
Right.
But he never panned out when he played. He just didn't have it together. I think Hutchinson in a more disciplined, better situation could be better. But again, we're talking about the Leafs D. So if the problem exists where the forwards and the defense are still going to allow the same amount of volume of shots that Freddie Anderson, is seeing, it could be touch and go no matter who's in net. But it's a smart move in a sort of an emergency situation. Like you can't for a 5th round or whatever, you do that every day.
And Jan,
I'll defer to Pete on Hutchinson because you know Hutchinson a lot better than I do. Given look, there was times I thought that he could be a number 1 goalie out in Winnipeg, and clearly got superseded first by Mason, obviously, and then by Hellebuck. And his career has been spotted at best, I guess, the last couple of years. And for Toronto, I mean, 5th rounders are currency, but they're not a ton of currency. I give Callan recognizing that, look, we have Luongo already. We have, Reimer's probably not going anywhere despite him playing very up and down. Let's get an asset now for a guy who could, all but we know, flame out later on down the year and not get anything for him, or at best get a 7th rounder. And we're not going to probably get, put it this way, the likelihood of getting more than a 5th rounder is relatively remote because of the type of goal he is, because of the market is. Maybe you'd get a 4th, but it's you can get a lot higher than a 5th for a guy like Hutchinson.
And his salary at 1.3, that's a little pricey. I mean, a lot of backups are.
Again, you got to remember, if you do it at the end of February, you only have 2 months left of the season, really. So everything gets kind of prorated, kind of figure out. And you could always eat part of salary. Eating $650,000 on $1 million salary.
No, I know that, but even at a 1.3, when he's in the minors, you're only burying $1.025 million. So $275,000 of that is going to hit the cap, and the Leafs will pay that because they have a lot of cap space this year. And I think more than just the sort of disaster backup for Anderson being hurt. I mean, there was that, and if Anderson's hurt more than a couple days, then they obviously going to call up Hutchinson. Their goaltending in their AHL affiliate, the Marlies, has been horrific all year. Eamon McAdam, Jeff Glass, Kazimir Kaskasuo, all under 900 save percentages. This is a team that won the Calder Cup last year. Not the same players, but they're 500, and it's based mostly on the fact that their defense and their goaltending has really struggled. So I think Hutchinson was brought in to hopefully play like he did last year with Manitoba, Peter, but also They had no games of an NHL experience after Sparks, and now I think Hutchinson had 108 games NHL experience, and can step in if they need him. And I have to say, watching the game against the Islanders on Saturday at 4-0 after Sparks had given up 4 goals on 18 shots, if Hutchinson was on the bench, he would have been in the game. So that's the difference.
Sparks played well the night before. So I mean, again,
look,
Islanders were also coming into that place really motivated, especially going against Tavares. I mean, look at the game Barzal had first of all.
Oh, I'm not disputing that. I'm just
calendars for weeks and months.
No, I'm just commenting on Jan. Sparks has been remarkably he's got a 6-2-1 record, and we won't continue on the Leafs after this. He's got a 6-2-1 record, but he has played bad in half of his games. He's been covered up by their offense, and you can see the difference in that team based on having a Vezina caliber goalie in Anderson covering up their mistakes, and Sparks letting in a couple shots that should have never gone in. So.
And you've made the key point there, a Vezina caliber candidate. It's like the Rangers with Lundqvist at times. He had to stand on his head to win. And Toronto is basically figuring that they will either outscore opponents or Anderson will make lots and lots of key saves to keep them in games to give them a chance to win. And we've talked about ad nauseum, ad infinitum, remediating and upgrading that blue line.
Yeah, and Anderson, see, it's not an easy 66 games he played last year. That's the thing. If you're going to have him face 40 shots a night, you've got to play him less because he needs more time to recover. And they're playing him the most close to the most starts in the league, and he's facing close to the most shots in the league.
It reminds me a lot of Vasilevsky last year, where he wore down late. And granted, Tampa Bay has a much better defense around him, but he wore down late. You kind of wonder, is the same thing going to happen to Anderson? And maybe, honestly, there's a little bit of a break that he gets, regardless of the reason. If Toronto can just kind of even stay 500 during the time he's out, may not be the worst thing in the world because it makes him refreshed towards the latter part of the season when they're really going to need him.
Okay, now the other Florida deal, and this one is more indicative of the rental deal because they trade Alex Petrovic, who's a pending UFA, an Alberta native, traded from the Panthers to the Edmonton Oilers for Chris Weidman, who they had acquired from Ottawa last month for a conditional pick and a conditional 3rd-round pick. Now, you got to realize what's going on with Edmonton right now. They've lost 5 games in a row. Clefbaum is out probably another 6 weeks with a broken thumb, I believe. Chris Russell is out right now. So they bring in Petrovic. Now, the thing is, Peter, I look at this deal and I'm like, okay, Jan and I were going back and forth on Twitter saying, this is a deal that I wish Toronto would have made because he's a bottom pairing guy who's tough and clears the front of the net. But that's not what he's being acquired for.
No.
By Edmonton. He's being acquired to be put into the top 4 because they've got nobody.
Yeah, they've got nobody, and apparently they're poor on the cycle down low and all this. Let's not forget the other interesting thing that happened on Twitter yesterday as all this started unfolding. Was Petrovic was the guy that they traded Riley Smith for, like to keep Vegas got to keep Petrovic.
That worked out well.
Like, I mean, this is how bonkers this whole scenario is in terms of and we all just before we get into what your point was, Mike, when there's a huge trade and you look at like all the things that happened from a massive trade years ago and the spider web that goes through and you see where everything ends up. This is kind of what this whole Vegas thing is sort of having the same effect right now. And that's what's super interesting about it. I
mean, one thing also, Peter, to add is you got to add in that Jonathan Marchessault is also technically part of that. Right?
So exactly. There's another one.
Not just Smith.
Not just Smith. So now Edmonton brings in a guy and they've got problems. And what I'm curious about with this is this Hitchcock saying to Chiarelli, I can't fix this with what you have? Or is this Hitchcock saying, we need to change something and you've got to find something better than what we have, or I need more? Like what's the directive here? Because in any sane world, Peter Chiarelli should be listening to Ken Hitchcock about what's there. But if then, just to add to the mystery of it all, if Ken Hitchcock is trying to get in on player personnel decisions about what he needs, how long is he going to be there for? And what's Ken Hitchcock thinking too?
Well, and Jan,
I'll let Peter go ahead first, Mike, and I'll touch on it when you're done.
Yeah, because I mean, the one thing, and we can look at the thread of both of these deals. Let's concentrate on this one first. These are short-term, just like Hitchcock is a short-term coach. Everybody believes these are short-term deals. Weidman, I believe, was a UFA at the end of this year. So is Petrovic. All they do is give up a conditional draft pick. They had an extra third-round pick, so they give up either whatever the higher of the two third-round picks that they have are. So they give up an extra draft pick and they get themselves a defenseman who maybe can plug the hole. But this is not like they traded for somebody who has 3 or 4 years left. And it's the same thing with the other deal, which we'll talk about after this. But Jan, Petrovic is a Hitchcock type of player. And if you look at from the Florida perspective, they've gotten a third and a fifth for 2 guys who were pending UFAs. They did it before January 1st. I don't know, I'm not looking at their roster right now, but they probably have a couple other UFAs. I think Dale Talon is in full rental mode, full sell mode, not major players, but the guys who he probably wasn't going to sign, which to me, I mean, I think it says if Luongo gets hurt again, our season is over with. So why not trade Hutchinson? And we've got younger defensemen, so why not move Petrovic and play the younger guys?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Petrovic is a UFA, making decent money. Look this way, we talked about it. Same thing also. Were you going to get at the deadline more than a third rounder for Alex Petrovic? And the likelihood is no. That's again, we talk about for the Rangers. Adam McQuaid they got as a draft pick. There's likelihood is they're going to move McQuaid. The hope is I get a 2. I'm not expecting a 2. I'd settle for a 3, which would be in essence what you almost gave up to get him at that point in time. I think they gave up a 4 maybe or something to get him. So if they get a 3, that's the kind of return you're likely going to get for that kind of defenseman. So as you said, Florida's in rebuild mode. They're looking forward to the future already. Petrovic is not a key member of their future, at least now, but we know 2 years ago they thought he was when they made the move to keep him as opposed to Smith and Marcia. So Hitchcock gets a physical blue liner, which is something that he's looking for to help fix a bereft blue line that's missing, dare I say, Chris Russell, which is nothing special, but especially Clefbaum, who was starting to really mature into that defense. When we spoke about it the other day, it's the trickle effect also. No Clefbaum. Nurse has to step up. Nurse really hasn't stepped up. He hasn't played great except after that initial blush after he was acquired. He struggled in that role. Maybe you now augment, and I'm sure we'll get into the Brandon Manning trade also, but now you augment it with 2 other blue liners who are experienced guys, enabling other guys to move down the pecking order. And that Hitchcock is now saying, well, we had that initial great run when I started. Now we're kind of falling back to earth. Cam Talbot is still struggling between the pipes. Mika Koskinen has struggled also the last couple of games. Not always all on the goalies, a lot on the blue line. I'll add a guy in who, while he's not terrific, he's a lot better than the guys that I'm rolling out there every day for a cost of a third rounder. And then we'll see what happens if we can stay afloat, at least until we get Clefbaum back, let alone Russell.
Now, the other deal, and this goes along with the first deal with Petrovic, and this one, they were saying that there were other balls up in the air with Edmonton yesterday, and I had to kudos to Mark Spector from Sportsnet because he was on it from like Saturday.
Yeah, he dropped the hint that something was coming.
Yeah, and then the deal came down, and Peter, this one is funny. It's laughable. And not laughable in the sense that it's a bad deal, but laughable in the sense that Drake Caggiula, excuse me, was one of Connor McDavid's closest friends apparently on the Edmonton Oilers, and he gets traded for, if anybody is the arch enemy of Connor McDavid, it's the guy that broke his collarbone in Brandon Manning. The deal was Jason Garrison, who was a walk-on tryout guy who got a contract.
He'll be on waivers today.
Probably. So Garrison and Caggiula, who are both Caggiula's got another year at $1.5 million for Robin Norrell, who is a prospect in Sweden, and Brandon Manning, who's got another year at $2.25 million. So they've plugged the hole of Russell and Clefbaum with Petrovic and Manning. But the thing is, this is like, I see what Chicago is doing here and the deals that they've made I have to tip my hat to Stan Bowman, because what is he doing? He's getting, he probably wasn't going to sign Nick Schmaltz or didn't want to sign him to the big deal. So he turns around and he trades him to Arizona. He gets Dylan Strome. He gets the other prospect who's drawing. I'm drawing a blank on.
I'm drawing. But Strome was a trade.
Brendan Perlini.
Right.
Yeah.
And in this deal, he gets Kajula, who is I think is a good young winger, but just
with another year at a serviceable $1.5 million.
For a defenseman who, when he got signed for $2 25, I'm like, for what? I mean, ask Russ and Anthony about the quality of Brandon Manning. He was barely a bottom pairing guy with the Flyers. So you know, this is I don't get what Chiarelli's doing unless it is what you said, Peter. He was given a shopping list by Ken Hitchcock, and he's filling the shopping list.
But the problem is if you're going to wait, like Ken Hitchcock, I mean. I don't know if you guys ever saw it. So back in going back in history here, back in 2002 for the Salt Lake Winter Olympics, Hockey Canada released a video of its process and all these behind the scenes interviews between Quinn, Hitchcock, and who was the other coach? It
wasn't Lemaire, was it?
No, it wasn't Lemaire. It was someone else. But how they went through all their things in their meetings and they're talking about players and evaluations. It's super interesting.
Okay.
And stuff. How these guys talked about players and what they wanted and everything. So certainly Ken Hitchcock, with his plethora of experience, has an idea of what he wants in players. The crazy thing with all this is if Hitchcock gave Chiarelli a shopping list, it's like asking someone who's never cooked a meal to go shopping for you and figuring out what to buy. You don't just say steak.
Right.
You say, I want a New York cut, whatever. You don't say, I want extra lean ground beef. I want a red onion, not onion.
Yeah.
Like
I want steak, but that doesn't mean go to Ponderosa and get one that's full of brisket.
Exactly. So and Chiarelli yeah, exactly. Go to a butcher, not God. So I mean, and Chiarelli's come back with this stuff.
He's already that
and he's now the thing with Manning is I think there is a wonderful thing to hype up about Manning and the McDavid thing. And I think that got a little overblown. I think that was a fun thing to look at, just to say to for people, and everyone did it. Like, it doesn't matter what news outlet you were working for, you piled on Chiarelli for that, for no other reason. But there are players who have beefs all over the place, and they come together and stuff, and it's an on ice thing. And yeah, you're pissed off, you broke my collarbone. Okay, whatever. But you move on. Injuries happen all the time in the NHL, dirty or not.
If Mike Pekka can play on the same team with Darcy Tucker, the guy who blew out his ACL, then anything is possible.
Yeah, exactly.
But
so a couple of things, guys, just to kind of step back to what we did originally. So we missed Dirk Cotter getting fired. Adam Gaze has just been fired by Miami.
Okay.
Marvin Lewis is out in Cincy.
Okay.
Black Monday is in full effect tonight in the NFL.
Somebody break out the scythe.
Yep, that's right. So Black Monday. So in terms of just kind of so interesting, we talk about guys hating each other. So, I mean, you guys know I'm a big baseball fan. So there's a lot of talk with JT Realmuto going from maybe Miami to LA, and the potential return was going to be Yasiel Puig, which obviously didn't happen because he went to the Reds. Now, anybody who knew anything knew that Mattingly and Puig literally couldn't stand being in the same room with each other.
No, so that's like
that was Martin and Reggie were mediated. The rumor was, Ballsy, is that I guess that Hitchcock and or Chiarelli went to McDavid before they made this trade and asked him. And what is McDavid going to say? No, you can't bring him in. So clearly he got reported that he said yes. And again, when guys become teammates, there's guys you hate playing against.
I just think that
having on your team.
I just think the dichotomy.
It's a great story. It's a great story for guys to write about. But again, when you become a team, you don't work, that stuff kind of gets lost in the shuffle and moved by the wayside. So look, look. This is the thing we talked about. Is Manning a great defenseman? No. Is he worth $2.25 million a year? Most likely not. Is he worth it for another year? Clearly no. But Hitchcock is basically putting stuff together with spit and baling wire to avoid paying a lot of money on signing guys. But the problem is, as we talked, you have Lucic signed for 4 more years at $6 million a year. And my favorite part of what came out yesterday, and I think it was according to Mark Spector, is that they try to put Spooner in the deal, and nobody wanted to take Spooner because of what he's making and that he signed for 2 years. So it's kind of funny if you think about it, based upon what happened, that the Rangers got Spooner. Nobody wanted him signed for 2 years. They signed him for 2 years. I would have gone 1. He got traded with the Rangers eating $900,000 of cap hit. Now Edmonton gets him, and literally about a month after they get him, they try to pawn him off to anybody, and they can't find a taker.
Right. Well, final thing on this, I said this yesterday, and I got a little flack on it, but I think it's true. Edmonton acquired a couple of nice bottom pairing defensemen to go along with the 4 or 5 other bottom pairing defensemen they already have on their roster. They've got maybe 2 guys with Clefbaum out, and that's Nurse and Larson, who I would consider top 4, and the rest of their defense are 5, 6s, and 7s. Who, some of them who are barely belong in the NHL, and I'm including Chris Russell, who's making $4 million and who's hurt right now. He is not a top 4 defenseman, but he's being put in that position, and I hope. And I'm fairly confident that Kyle Dubas is watching this and realizes that spending 3rd round picks and 5th round picks for guys who plug in, that's one thing, and I think the Leafs could use that. But they need to pay the price for the big guy that they desperately need. Otherwise, I think they're spinning their wheels when it comes to improving their defense.
Yeah, they probably are. But I think one of the interesting things is if you have a guy like Chiarelli out there running around doing this kind of madness, it's going to maybe jumpstart a few other things and open up some other possibilities, because you got to wonder, like, are other GMs sitting back going, I think I better call Pete right now, and does that open up some other ideas, because they know he's desperate and he's trying to do things. Yesterday, just to tie us into a Jets thing, yesterday we found out Byfuglien's out till after the All-Star game.
I was going to ask
and it looks like he, in the game against the Wild, he went into the corner. I can't remember who came in on him, but his ankle. What's that?
Luke Cunnin.
Okay, yeah, and his ankle went over a bit, his left ankle. So I don't know if it's a high ankle sprain. I hope it's not, but they haven't said anything. But they said out till after the Jets game, or after the All-Star game. So my joke last night, yesterday when all this came down was obviously the Byfuglien news put Chiarelli into a panic, because he was preparing to offer Nugent Hopkins and for Myers in a third. Because this is the way this stuff goes. The collateral damage of what you hear about this is so preposterous. It sort of blows the mind. What I found very interesting about it was there was simply there was a very divided media in Edmonton about this. I'll give Spector, as you said, credit. He stuck to what happened, didn't sort of opine on anything, but the usual Edmonton defenders came out in full force, and it was very interesting to see. And that is a market that is probably so divided and filled with a lot of venom in different areas, whether it be social media, whether it be fan ire, whether it be even media ire too, of what they cover. It's toxic. And I don't know if you guys have seen this. It's been retweeted a little bit, but there's someone who's taken a clip from the first series of Oil Change, which started like 6 years ago or 7 years ago.
Right.
Where Daryl Cates is talking about what he wants to do. It's as awful to watch as that Melnick interview was before the season started. You'll see it on there. It is crazy when you see what he's saying and how he's talking and how he looks. And it's like Melnick 1.0, but we just hadn't seen it yet. And it was sort of got buried in this. I had to go to Edmonton for business in the spring, like January, like almost like 9 years ago, 2010. And we went to an Oilers game with some business colleagues and stuff. And everyone around there was selling. You could see it outside the arena. You could see it in the city too. They were selling shirts that said Hope, Hull, Omar, PRV, Eberle. All gone.
Yep.
Where's your hope now? They have none. They're hopeless. Larson, who's an E, and to give me 2 S's, right? Like it's unbelievable.
Yes. All right. We've got a few minutes here, and we've got to talk about this because it really attracted a lot of attention over the weekend, and that is the comments of Dallas Stars president Jim Lites. That was highlighted in a piece. I think it was Sean Shapiro in The Athletic. Yep. And I won't repeat the words, but everybody Everybody knows it's no, never. Everybody.
Oh, there goes the beep. Oh, we've now become.
Everybody knows what he said. But the thing, there's been a really an interesting reaction to this, Jan, because I mean, Lights came out, was clearly not happy with the production of Ben and Seguin. Now Seguin signed his extension earlier this year. They're both locked up long term. I believe they both have no move clauses. They're there for the duration if they want them to be. And this was basically dissatisfaction at a presidential and ownership level in the production of their two key players. But honestly, we've seen the problems of the Dallas Stars over the years. It's not Ben and Seguin. It's not Alex Radulov. It's their defense. It's their depth. And up until the time they got Ben Bishop, it was their goaltending. So I think it's a little unfair to slam these guys and expect them to, be more than point per game players all the time.
Right. No, I agree. So I have a part of the quote is this. It's not about how much money. I don't resent the money, Light said. It's about what we expect the money to be. You can't win if your best players aren't your best players and they aren't best players. Now, you can view that in multiple different directions. So as you said, Seguin was a guy who had 84 points his first year in Dallas after Boston got rid of him, and we can go through chapter and verse. Then his next 4 years, 77, 73, 72, 78. So in essence, you're looking, he is a point-per-game player.
Yes.
In the NHL right now, a point per game, in essence, gets you about $8.5 million a year, whether or not you believe the player deserves it or doesn't deserve it. But that's what kind of was the open marketplace, especially for a guy at his age, in terms of what he can generate. But you compare and contrast to what Ben had put up, 79 in 2013-14, 87, 89, 69, and back to 79 last year.
Right, and that's after a major injury too.
Right, Sagan's had an okay year this year. Ben has had an okay year this year. Neither one of them are playing at an elite level. There's absolutely no question about that. Their best player this year, who missed a couple games, is most certainly Alexander Radulov. But as you mentioned, it's the depth that's really killing them, right? They overpaid for Hansel, and Hansel's done nothing. You look at Devin Shore has had a pretty good year, but he's been up and down. We talked about in the pre-show.
Klingberg was out for a month.
Right.
And he's underpaid.
Right. Spets is getting an inordinate amount of money, and he most certainly hasn't lived up to that contract. He's been okay, but the decline started last year, and it's kind of continued. Decline started 2 years ago, continued last year. This year he's been better, but certainly not elite. Defensively, you would think Julius Honka would have taken a step forward this year. He most certainly has not. Esa Lindell's been okay, not great. But again, we talked about defenseman growth not being linear. You have to love what you've seen out of Miro Heiskanen, and they most certainly miss Klingberg, and Bishop's been okay between the pipes. Now, maybe
I think Mathot's been out for most of the year, right? So
been out. So you look at Leeds and what Gagliardi said. Yeah, maybe it's viewed as a shot across the bow. Maybe it's viewed as a way to spur both of these guys on. I think if you ask both of them, I think each one of them will admit that they haven't been at an elite level this year. But are we saying that the play or the lack of elite play out of Seguin and Ben is the main reason for them losing? But what you're going to do is you're going to challenge the guys who are making the most money, with hopefully the message filtering down the rest of the team. And to me, that's in essence what he did here. He called out his leaders. He said, you guys need to be better, which in essence is telling everybody on the team that, you know what, I am taking the two main guys to task, and you guys should get the message by me taking these two guys to task, and you guys need to pick up your effort as well. And that's kind of how I view it. Not so much that I'm calling out these two guys, but if they're the captain and the assistant captain on this team, they're the guys that need to be the leaders both in and out of the locker room and on the ice.
So Jan, I think you're bang on. And one of the interesting things about sports is the idea of accountability and how you take leadership and you use that and you hold people to account. And you know this because you know I don't know baseball like you do, but it's certainly something in football. It is something that is so important in a locker room. And there's an incredible article written in Sports Illustrated this past fall about what happened in the Seahawks locker room with their defense and accountability and the way Russell Wilson was coddled. This is the kind of thing that when you're the leaders of the team, the Ben and Seguins on this team and stuff, and you get called out, that I think you're bang on. There should be a trickle-down effect of be a leader. It's not just about putting up points as much as it is all the other things. And that needs to trickle down, and they need to hold other guys to account. They're whether they put the puck in the net or not, they need to bring everyone else up with them. And that's not the proverbial, oh, well, they make players around you better, but they're playing on the ice. That is the idea of, we are leading in the locker room. We're bringing these guys with us. We've been there. We're the core of this team. We have to reach out and make these guys better in everything. And it's probably speaking to a whole host of things. The other thing that was super interesting about this was the pile on that came from many in the media and some people who I follow on Twitter. Again, I won't mention names, but it was pretty embarrassing. Like, these are professional people, and there's there's writers from major networks, and their hot takes are, maybe your GM sucks. That's what you produce. This is so no wonder everyone in sports is so afraid to give a quote or be honest, because you when you get something like this, you don't treat it with the level of intrigue and interest and sort of processing that you should do. You just rip you fire off a few stats and say, oh yeah, maybe your GM sucks is your conclusion. This was something that was way bigger than that. It was about an executive going off, which is very rare, and being incredibly candid, right or wrong. But it required, I think, the people wanting the hot takers to be way better than what they were. And it was a bit of a letdown. I think there's a lot of moving pieces in this, but your conclusions of looking up a few fancy stats and stuff and then going, your GM sucks, that's not good enough either. Well, you can't vilify the guy because he gave you something to work with and then say, well, you're wrong, and then leave it at that.
And that's the thing, Peter. It's like, I mean, at first they thought that lights had flown off the handle, and then they find out that, he had done it after consulting with the ownership, with Gagliardi, and saying that, that he was going to do this. And even Jim Nill came out after the fact in an interview and said, I knew he was going to address the situation. I didn't know he was going to use as many colorful words as he did. But the difference between, like, say, the NFL and the Seahawks situation you're talking about, and what's going on in basketball and in baseball and hockey, is guaranteed contracts versus non-guaranteed contracts.
That's a very good point.
And this is the thing. So when you have players who have protections like no move clauses and no trade clauses, you have a first-year coach. You don't want Montgomery basically creating enemies with his two best players. So right now, you have the only means of motivation that some of these organizations have is to call these players on the carpet verbally, confronting them in the media. Because as soon as you start, like, scratching them or benching them or limiting their ice time, then you create a narrative that I think snowballs into negativity. This may get Ben and Sagan, it may put a hair up their, and get them going, which is what they really want them to do. But it attracts a lot of attention. I don't know if this is the attention that Dallas really wanted, but they've got it now.
Yeah, also, they've got it. And
go ahead, Peter. Sorry,
you got to manage it.
Yeah, go ahead, Jay.
My view on this is, you brought up the key point, right? So if you think about football compared to, let's say, hockey, right? Football really doesn't have guaranteed contracts. You have guaranteed money associated within the contract, but you can be cut at any point in time. And then we talk about dead cap space and everything else. And the NHL has mildly similar in terms of dead cap space, in terms of trying to pass a guy through waivers. And as long as it's, whatever's above the minimum stays on your cap hit. But once you're given that contract, that money's yours. And so there's not a separate component that's guaranteed. And football is the only one that has that. And the other piece that's the key is the no movement and no trade clause. And this is the thing that with a lot of the contracts that are being given out now, that's the area that kind of restricts you in terms of movement, in terms of being able to do anything. And that's why, for the Rangers, they used to hand them out basically like candy out of a dish because everybody seemed to get one. And now they're hopefully being a little bit smarter in terms of who does and does not getting it, and talking about modified no movement clauses. But moving forward, I think one of the things that's going to come up in the CBA is likely going to be the utilization of no movement and no trade clauses, how they're treated, what you can do associated with it, how the cap in essence works. And look, both of these guys are making a lot of money. Both of these guys, if they're not producing, need to be called on the carpet. But I don't think we're going to see either one of these guys being 90-point players. They're likely going to slide somewhere into the 80, 85-point range if we're lucky. And is that necessarily worth $8+ million? But you also have to factor in is what is the percentage of the cap hit that somebody's utilizing now as opposed to moving forward. So next year when the cap goes to $83 million, if a guy's making $8.5 million, it's a little over 10%. That's a heck of a lot better than 14 to 15% when that contract was signed, which is a huge difference that has to be factored in.
Just finally this. I have a weird feeling when it comes up to the next CBA that one of the things that the owners are going to press for is in terms of buyouts of contracts, for limiting the implications on the cap going forward for the buyout. In like, say, okay, for example, Chicago wants to buy out Brent Seabrook. He's making almost $7 million for another, I think, 4 years, something like that. Right now, it's 2/3 of that amount. If they buy him out, it's 2/3 of the amount of the remaining amount of the contract over double the number of years, spreading it out. If the teams are willing to pay the 2/3, you can say that there's definitely a penalty there. But why? I'm saying the owners are probably going to say, why should we be penalized? The players getting the money. Why should we be penalized against the cap, especially with the cap, even though the cap is going up, but more and more that cap is being occupied by, retained salary and other things. I mean, Peter, I have a feeling that, there's never going to be able to get rid of guaranteed contracts. You're never going to be able to get rid of probably signing bonuses on deals. You're probably not going to go to war over no move or no trade clauses. But in terms of being able to clear space on players that the contracts are a mistake, I think that might be something that they go to bat for.
I think there's got to be something in this next round of negotiations that allows to keep one of the best things about hockey from a fan side is player movement and activity.
Yes.
Where players keep some money. They've got to get a little more creative about it. Mike, we've talked about this before. The idea of selling cap space. So you can buy from someone, not just trading the player, the bad contract, the pseudo injured reserve stuff, all that. There's got to be a way of doing this that takes the money that's being used, maybe puts it back into the player's hands, like the group of players, the collective NHLPA. Right. There's got to be a solution that way, because when you get these stale things, it hurts everyone. It hurts the interest in the sport. It hurts interest in the team. People are going to tune out, and next thing you know, you've got a team that can't manage its cap anymore because it tried to do the right thing, it didn't work out, and they can't do anything. The fans tune out, and it's bad. So I agree. There's got to be some creative things around this.
You talk about it, right? You look at Chicago now, right? Chicago is hamstrung, and I love everybody ripping. Here's a hint, guys: you won several Stanley Cups.
Yeah,
shut up.
No, yeah,
my team 2 or 3 Stanley Cups, and then have a couple years where we're fallow.
Right, but
I'll be upset, but I'll be more than happy to pop that Stanley Cup DVD into my TV set.
But Jan, for
very happy.
Or for the league doesn't want Chicago all of a sudden. I mean, yes,
yeah,
they paid these guys. They're Seabrook deserves what he's making. So does Keith. So does Taves. So does Kane. But the league does not want this team to be basically in salary cap hell for the next 5 or 6 years, based on paying these players what they earned. So and we have to go because Jan has to do another podcast in a few minutes. But anyway, we'll talk about this more. We'll talk about the World Junior when we come back on Wednesday. We should have Russ back from Notre Dame. We should have Eck back, and we'll have everybody else back.
Tell him to get me some Notre Dame swag while he's there for me. Just don't show me the Cotton Bowl highlights.
How about some swag about them losing to Clemson?
Hey, I'm a Notre Dame fan. Watch it over there, like that already.
Oh man, I've got a buddies in Notre Dame.
I didn't.
I'm a huge Notre Dame football fan.
Yeah, I've got a friend who is too, Jan. He's not happy.
78 Cotton Bowl Montana comeback, which is why I became a Niners fan when he went there. So it's 40 years already. I basically was following after the Sabbath, and I said, yeah, I don't have to watch anymore. I'm done. It's good. I didn't even turn it on when I saw what was going on.
For the very Irish Jan Levine. And for Peter Tessier, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching. Happy New Year. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.